So let's go back around and talk about the work you all have done to date. I know um, you guys have talked about it a little bit here, but let's go a little bit deeper and talk about the work you've done, internships, and what you plan on accomplishing long term and post graduation. But first, I want to start with you, Dr. Gallagher. In along your journey, um, talk about just a couple of the internships, talk about a couple of the places that you've worked, and then talk about what you're thinking about doing long term. Are you going to be at Morgan State until you retire? Are you looking to build something even bigger than this? Talk about what your career goals and also your career past has been.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can see following these four introductions why I got these four students y'all together, right? With the ambition and intellect and past experiences that they have is absolutely wonderful. And one of the things that I have decided recently, I've been at Morgan State University for about 2 years now, is I've last year submitted my paperwork for promotion from associate professor to full professor, and then for tenure. And I should find out in about a month or so the answer, the outcome of that. Yeah, fingers crossed. I feel like I have a good case to achieve tenure, but we will see. So my goal is to remain at Morgan State University for the rest of my career. I was previously at Indiana University, and I loved working there. But I was able to come home and be closer to my family and my daughters. And so I'm just so happy to be at Morgan State University, and especially happy to be at an HBCU. What I can tell you is, and I said this to some friends recently, if for some reason I do not earn tenure at Morgan State University, of course, I would have to start looking for another job. I do not see me ever working for a school that is not an HBCU. I have found what I see as my social work home in the HBCU community and culture. It's where I have felt most comfortable in having real, candid conversations about the role of social workers in addressing discrimination, racism, issues related specifically to urban communities. So I love the academic world. I love doing research. I love teaching, and I love sharing the great work that we do at Morgan State University. So I plan on making my career here, for the next 2 or 3 decades. In regards to kind of larger scale work, I've spent all my career addressing issues related to addiction and mental health counseling. And I really plan on staying on this path of criminal justice and juvenile justice reform, because I believe while addressing criminal and juvenile justice reform, we're going to need supports from all avenues, and we're going to need expertise from all avenues, legal avenues, policy advocates, public health experts. I believe, and in my 20 years of doing social work, that we, social workers, the 4 students here, the future of social work, we are best equipped at helping reform the juvenile and criminal justice system. And that's even evident in the title of our presentation coming up in April. The beginning of the title, the first half of it, is Juvenile Justice Through a Compassionate and Empathetic Lens. We can hold individuals accountable for their behavior. Sometimes that may even include incarceration. We can advocate for public safety within the justice system, as we should, and we can do all of that aligned with our values of our profession: empathy, compassion, brotherly, sisterly love. So my career goal is, quite frankly, I want to and plan to spend the rest of my career at Morgan State University. I love living where I live now, and I love working at the university. If for some reason it doesn't work out, I absolutely will be applying for jobs at other HBCUs because I couldn't see me working anywhere else. In regards to my future goals, I'm going to continue staying forward and pursuing the social work mission within juvenile and criminal justice reform efforts, while also preparing students, again, such as the four we have here, of becoming leaders in this area, because I believe social work is the best profession, and we are best prepared to help those that get involved in the justice system.
Absolutely. Now think about FAMU too. I'm a FAMU guy, so go get you some warm weather if they don't give you tenure.
I like sunshine too. Yes.
All right. All right, Rebecca, I know you touched on what you're doing with the in the court systems now, but talk about some of your talk a little bit deeper about what you've done there, and then some of your other experiences. And before you start that, one of my first interns was a Delta from Delaware State. So you're on mute right now, but
Oh, so nice.
yeah, so I'm a fan of you guys.
Thank you. But for me, okay, so right now I'll talk about like a little bit of like what I'm doing now. So right now I am under Miss Brenda Harrell at the circuit court, and I'm in the medical service division. And I kind of deal with custody and visitation evaluations. So this is basically, we get a case and we interview the parents or we interview the child just to see like what's going on, and then like what's the circumstance of the situation and what parent is more like capable of having custody, or if visitation things need to be made, like changes need to be made. And then like you will write a report and then we'll submit it to the judge, and the judge will have access to it as well as all attorneys. um and then the judge will come up with the final decision. But we just give a recommendation of what we think is best for the child, because sometimes within these evaluation interviews, it can get kind of ugly because some parent might be trying to make the other parent seem there's more so like they're trying to get back at each other, and they're not really looking at the best interest of the child. So we're kind of the mediators between that. But and then I also get to dabble in a little bit of the mental health court, because medical services deal with that as well. And that is basically, someone committed a crime, but at the time they weren't in the right state of mind. They can, plead. They can plead not criminally responsible. So that's very interesting. I'm really into mental health court. I got to go to district court a couple weeks ago and sit in and see how they operate their system. So I thought that was really cool. Some past internships I got to do, I was at Global Healthcare Systems, which was more like a clinical, which was more of a clinical background. So I had a caseload. I was supervised under a therapist, and she would sit in with my sessions with me. However, as I'm learning what I do like, what I don't like, I know that I don't really care for clinical work, as in therapy. I feel like the more I get my feet wet, the more I get comfortable, I might go back to that end. But I really like having a caseload where the the court is my client, because in the court you don't really have clients. You kind of have that one or two sessions. Well, really just one session, and if you need any more information, you would just reach out to them. But basically, the court is our client. They ask us a question, and we have to figure out that question. We have to figure out the answer for them. So um, I really like it. I would say like my long term goal, I want to open up my own foster care for girls. um but make it more of like a home away from home. Like, you see a lot of people who get into this business of foster care, and they only want the money, but I don't want that. I want to be able to have girls come into my facility, and when they leave better than they came in with. They have a sense of home. Like, I'm not home right now, but this is my home. I have people that care about me, people who are going to show up for me, people who are going to teach me how to do my hair, how to do this, who are going to come to my school events, who are going to advocate for me. It's a dream of mine, but it's a dream that I see coming true for me, that I feel like I'm working towards every day. But for right now, as I graduate school, as I'm getting ready to graduate in school in May, um, I want to get in the court system, in the law system, whether that is in the courthouse or within public defenders, like, working with them. But I'm still like, trying to figure that out. But I take it like, day by day.
Now, some of the things that you see in court, Rebecca, how do you keep those in the court? How do you not take some of those situations home with you?
Um, I like that you asked me because it's funny because when I do my evaluations, I am interviewing a lot of like kids, and it's so hard because you see a kid that's 5 years old or six, and they'll tell you all this stuff, and you catch yourself like, why do you like why are you experiencing all this and you're only five? Like, you know, life has its challenges, and I just feel like kids don't deserve that. Um, you should be outside playing on the playground. But I would say like I don't know. I have really good supervision with my supervisor, and usually sometimes after we have like hard evaluations or like we hear something that can be very heavy because kids are like a heavy topic when it comes to like certain situations. We do a lot of self-care. We have to like after evaluation you have to take a walk.
Mm.
um but my boss is really adamant on once you clock out, you clock out. You leave it there. You don't take it home. Um, and that's just doing self care. Kind of become trying to like you have to kind of train yourself to be neutral, even though that's easier said than done because at the end of the day we're all humans. We all have emotions. We all have feelings, and empathy is the biggest thing. So sometimes I see kids, and I'm like, oh my goodness, my heart, like you're adorable. Like I would just want you for myself, but in this line of work, you have to like kind of turn off your emotions. So I just feel like with good supervision that I have learned to keep it there, keep it at work. Um, do a lot of self care, a lot of journaling. If I have to take a walk, take a breather, and also talk about it. Talk about it with your peers, and not your peers outside of work, but your peers who are dealing with like my supervisor. So we have a lot of dialogue to like to let out what we felt or how it made us feel. Because sometimes people will go into evaluations or these heavy caseloads or therapy sessions, and they'll consume the trauma, but they're not letting the trauma also come out after receiving that. So you have to be able to like find how much that you can take in your own boundaries and what your heart knows are. And sometimes it's okay as the professional to say, okay, this is a little too much for me. Like you have to know how much you can take because at the end of the day, like that could be a lot.
Thank you for sharing that, Rebecca. I probably need to take more walks myself. All right, Grace, can you share some of the work that you've done, the internships, and what you plan on accomplishing long term? And then before, when you were talking, you said you took some time off between graduating to deciding what you were going to do. Can you talk through that process a little bit? What did you experience? What did you try? What did you not like? What helped you best in deciding what you wanted to do next?
Yeah, for sure. It was a tumultuous time in my life, that's for sure. I'm not gonna lie. I grew up playing sports, and so I actually went out to Berkeley to play lacrosse for their team. So once I graduated, I was a little bit lost, to be honest, because I had always just focused on lacrosse and just making it to college and to play, and so I didn't know what I wanted to do after that. I kind of was like, whoa, now what? I originally, when I was younger, kind of thought I would get into that athletic world, being a coach or something along those lines. But once I tried that immediately after graduating, I just knew that like that's not what was going to fulfill me in the long run. So I had to do a lot of self-reflection and just kind of finding myself in a way that separated me from that world, because I had grown up in it and I had just kind of saw it as my way to achieve great things. And so I just kind of put myself into it fully and then didn't really think about what was going to happen after graduating. There's not really much of a professional lacrosse world, and if so, I wasn't really interested in that. So it was a hard process, and I tried a lot of different things from being a behavioral therapist for children with autism to working nannying to working at I actually worked at a massage place for a long time at the front desk. So I did like a bunch of different things just trying to figure out what was important to me, and every time that like I did that self-reflection and all, like I said, like kind of social justice, helping people, fighting for people who can't speak for themselves or just don't have the voice, advocacy, that stuff was always very much instilled in me by my mother. So that was like really inside of me for sure. And then on the other hand, like I said, mental health, it definitely runs, mental illness runs in my family. I've had a lot of family members suffer from mental illness. So that's always also been something that has stuck in my interests throughout my whole life. So those two things, I think. And then I had to realize that I did need to come back to Baltimore because I was out in California during this time and I loved it. I lived in Oakland for a while and in Berkeley, and they're like the best. I love those cities, but I didn't have that foundation of my family and kind of the connection that I have in Baltimore, all like the people I grew up with and stuff like that. So once I figured that how important that was, once I realized how important that was, it got me to think about coming back. And then coming back was thinking about what I wanted to do when I came back. Um, and then, like I said, Morgan had always been right down the street from my house. I'd thought about social work. I found out about their program. So that was kind of my experience in that. It was a lot of hard work and a lot of self-reflection and just um just finding myself in a way that I hadn't yet in my life. So it was about 6 years. So I graduated in 2014 and I didn't come back to get my master's until 2021. So that was it was really a good time for me. I think I needed it since I was so focused as a young kid playing sports all the time that I didn't really like find other paths, if that makes sense. And I think that's a common issue with student athletes. Once they graduate, they kind of, if they don't have that professional opportunity or if they don't want to coach, like figuring out what is important to them other than that. So that was a big time in my life. But as of now, so I didn't have much social work experience at all when I started with the master's program in 2021. But my first year, I had a clinical internship. So I was working at an outpatient mental health clinic, and that was a great experience, especially to learn a lot about mental health and that whole world. But just like Rebecca said, I kind of realized that I didn't really want to be in a clinical setting. So I kind of asked my like advisors and Morgan if I could get a more of a macro policy level internship this year. And so I had the opportunity this year to work in City Hall in the office of Council Member Zeke Cohen. He represents the first district of Baltimore City, so like the Southeast. And this has been like a wonderful opportunity for me and has opened a lot of just thoughts about what I might want to do. I've learned so much about local government that I didn't really realize before at all. And I've learned about policy creation and advocating for policies and what it takes to, get laws to pass and through the city council and stuff. So that's been really interesting. I've gotten to like research for policies and stuff. And then learned a lot about community development and community collaboration and advocating for communities. So I go to like local community association meetings and represent the office and kind of just hear what the people are saying as our problems in their communities and what they need from us, connecting them to resources or working on applying for grants to get funding. I worked with one community association. I wrote an application for a grant to get cameras and lights put up in their neighborhood because they have a lot of problem with illegal dumping and drugs and drug dealing and crime. So we wrote an application for that. So it's just been a lot of different things. But like I think that the biggest thing that I'm learning this year is that I do want to stay on that like macro path, where I'm using my social work lens to create changes on a more systemic level rather than like one-on-one individual work. I'm not exactly sure what that's going to look like for me. But I do know that I think like social workers should be like more in all levels of government. And I do want to pursue that in some way. But I'm currently working on what that will look like. I'm not exactly sure where I want to go, but I definitely want to keep the interest of like community and crime prevention and just making changes on a more systemic level.
I love that way of thinking. Now, what is it about Baltimore and lacrosse? It seems
I,
like lacrosse is so big in Baltimore.
it is, and it's crazy because California it was not as big, but they did have a team, and so basically like I loved sports when I was a kid. I played soccer, basketball, and lacrosse until I graduated high school. And I would say basketball is my favorite sport, but you can't tell because right now because it's virtual, but I am very short. So I kind of knew that basketball wouldn't be as clear of a path. I would have to like really try hard to find a team to recruit like 5 foot player. So then the next thing I was told was that lacrosse is huge and Baltimore players are just they're on another level. I think that now that I'm older, it's a little more of a level playing field. But back when I was graduating high school, and then that was true. Like it was just a whole different world. Baltimore's a whole different world when it comes to lacrosse, and I don't really understand why. I think maybe it's like Hopkins.
Yeah.
I think that has a huge influence in it, but it was just something that I knew as a kid. I was told, like, if you want to go play lacrosse, you will be able to because you're from Baltimore and you have this like leg up, basically. The other sports, it's more equal all across the country. So I utilized that in a way to be able to go somewhere far away that I probably wouldn't be able to afford if I didn't have that lacrosse background. But it's interesting that you say that because it was something that was like instilled in me since I started playing at like 10 or whatever. And it is just a weird thing. And everyone, when you came out to California, if you were from Baltimore, like the other girls were like, oh, she's from Baltimore. She knows what she's doing on the field. So it is interesting. It's very interesting.
It is. All right, Jocelyn, would you mind sharing some of your experiences to date, internships, and what your long-term plans are within social work?
Yes. Excuse me. So, as my internship for the past 2 years, I've been working with Title 4E, and so I've been able to kind of experience different units within the Department of Social Services with the state of Maryland, and so in particular, Baltimore City. And I first started in the out-of-home placement in permanency and planning, and now I'm in custody and guardianship. It's been very interesting to see the process of how foster care is really handled. I had my own idea before starting graduate school, and now just like seeing how this process really is, how it really does impact the clients that I'm working with outside of the fact that they have they're not able to interact with their parents on the typical way or the typically how we may think of it if we're not in the foster care system. And then also dealing with being in the foster care system is a lot that they have to go through and experience, and it's making me want to really get into the clinical aspect and work with the child welfare system in some way, because I think that a lot of times people are so focused on either getting this child away from their parent or getting them back to their parent, and it's really important to also um, work on the trauma that they've experienced from their parents, from the child welfare system. There's a lot that I've seen that I really do want to work with when I get into the field, as well as over the summer I worked with a nonprofit that did a lot of career planning, and I really, really enjoyed that work as well. Just being able to give my students new skills, new ideas, new career paths that they may have never thought of. And I really enjoy the nonprofit work as well. So going forward, I definitely want to work in child welfare, but I also really enjoy the clinical aspect of social work. And so I know in some way I'll try to incorporate child welfare and the nonprofit work and clinical and try to figure out how to put that all together.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. All right, Adebambo, would you mind sharing some? Well, you've already shared that you were in the army and some of the different things that you shared about, Lagos and different things like that. What are your long-term goals when you look at having a background in chemistry, being an army vet, and then using all those frames of reference into bringing it into social work? How are you going to put all that together? Because that's a unique skill set that not many people have. How are you looking at it long term?
Um, Looking at long term, my aim is still to become a therapist in the future. And I really want to thank John Gallagher for giving us the opportunity today and for our upcoming juvenile reform event coming up in April. So, from the research that I look into in 2020, which shows that, in Maryland itself, we have African Americans that really they account for over 72% of juvenile intake. That was in 2020. It's so disheartening when I read some of the things and some of the research and the results that the outcome of the results of what our juvenile are actually going through in the community. So my first intern in my first year was in an elementary school, and I have to deal with absenteeism and truancy. Knowing what some of these kids go through at home and not coming to school, being absent or not coming to school on time, it really bothers me a lot that, wow, they are really going through a lot. And this is what is causing some of developmental trauma in some of these children. And seeing that, I have to work with these children and their parents to make sure that they come to school. And I brought the truancy level of that school with some of the problems that uh, has to deal with unemployment, and this is one of the reasons why I want to become a social worker. At the moment, I'm with Springboard Community Services in Baltimore. They deal with mental health counseling, individual family therapy, and I was opportuned to counsel a lot of people. These are hands-on training, dealing with people, knowing what people are actually going through. So when someone is talking about addiction, now me being a chemist, I can feel what they're going through in their system, that this is what they are actually going through. Rather than putting them down, I have the compassionate feelings with them, to deal with them, speak with them, and to be there for them, because people really need help. And we have to help our community. So my long-term plan is to become a therapist and see what I can do for the community.
Sounds good. I like that. I like what you just said about understanding when in chemistry when things mix, how they can have an effect on things. I think that that's an interesting and unique perspective that you'll be able to bring to the profession.